This is News Talk 980 CKNW.
Well, it was a wild day on the markets as investors and traders absorbed these U.S. election results. A lot of people waking up with a bit of a hangover today. Some people thrilled, some people not so much. So many questions left to be answered. What does a Trump presidency mean for our country, for the U.S. economy, and the world for that matter?
So let's bring in Michael Campbell, the host of Canada's top-rated financial show, Money Talks. Now, Mike, I was listening to the show on Saturday, and you said you wouldn't be surprised if this was the outcome. Why is that?
Well, because I wasn't looking at Mr. Trump. I was looking at global trends, and we've seen a lot of this. We're talking about the five-star movement in Italy, the Freedom Party in Austria, which is an anti-EU party, and of course Brexit was the big one. I mean, everybody said no, they're not going to vote to leave, and presto, they did. So this is a big one. I think the other thing here that I'm a little bit critical of the media is that I think they allowed their distaste for Mr. Trump personally to avoid that there were really good reasons for his supporters to be mad at the establishment. I mean, think about this. 94,605,000 people are permanently unemployed. Things like if you were going to help someone with employment, wouldn't it be through the school system first? And there's not a politician, Democrat or Republican, who does not agree that inner city schools are a disaster. You've got a 40% youth black unemployment this past summer. But what is the response of the establishment, Republican and Democrat? Oh, I know. We'll send our kids to private school. I mean, that's the kind of thing that drives them nuts. You know, I have tons of people suffering in America. You had the establishment in Washington grow richer. So I think those underlying issues have to be addressed, or we're going to see a lot more of this.
Yeah, I mean, so many people said this is really just a massive message to the political elites. Is Trump's election a sign that this anti-establishment sentiment has peaked then?
Well, I think in the States it'll be very interesting if he can take some actions that will sort of peter that out, that he's their candidate. So let's see how he does. But I'll tell you, globally, it's not over. I think, in fact, we're very early. You're not going to avoid the financial problems of low growth thanks to high taxation. But the big one in the States, let's see how they handle even more entitlement problems. Entitlement problems sunk Detroit into bankruptcy, Stockton, California into bankruptcy, Atlantic City, Puerto Rico. I think there's much more of that to come in the next few years, and we'll see how the public reacts then.
All right, let's talk about the markets here, Mike. Last night we saw a massive drop in the markets. They rebounded this morning. What will be the impact of a Trump presidency on those markets?
Well, I remember last week we talked about that, and I said I promised that the Trump he gets elected will really be negative. I didn't know how long that would last, though. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Well, my gosh, it lasted about 12 hours. I'm watching the markets last night as I'm watching election results, and the markets told me much earlier than CNN did that we have a Trump victory there. I mean, they went down 800 points. You know, excuse me. And now they recover over 1,000 of that, all the 800 and then a few hundred more. I thought that was interesting. Same thing, gold reversed. You know, the gains for gold when he was elected now have been reversed. U.S. dollar, I mean, the euro jumped up to $1.13, now dropped back to $1.09. I mean, absolutely right. It was absolutely wild. And I think a key point here, not to overlook, is the markets think it's positive that the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Mm-hmm. I'll also say this very quickly, that it wasn't going to change the main trends that are impacting the markets at all. Next up, for example, we'll be talking about it soon, whether the Federal Reserve will raise rates in September. And I'll finish with one last. This is a big positive for U.S. stocks, and that's that Mr. Trump, during the course of the campaign, said, I'm going to lower corporate tax rates to 15%. But then he said, and we're going to have a one-time 10% rate. The whole point he's making is let's get some of that $2.4 trillion that's held outside the country by U.S. companies to come back. That, I think, will be very popular.
Man, you know, there's just so much to wrap your head around. What worries you the most about this?
Well, I think, during the campaign, if he follows through on this, he promised to put tariffs on goods coming from China. Well, boy, that's an instant international trade war. I mean, it would dramatically hurt a global economy that can't afford it at this point. So that's bad news. I'm not sure if Trump will kill the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, but let's face it, during the campaign, he was super anti-trade, including NAFTA, and that's what Canadians should be paying attention to. You know, if you put a tariff on Canadian goods, I mean, you're going to talk really significant negative impact for our growth in Canada. I don't know, by the way, whether he would need congressional approval for that if he wants to rip up NAFTA, but still, that's a negative sign there. You've got to watch closely. We got the softwood lumber tariffs are back on the table. Maybe he wants to accede to the pressure from the U.S. lumber lobby to say, see, I'm doing what I said I'd do. So, yeah, there's still a lot on the table with him, and it does worry me. International trade really worries me. For Canadians, I worry about NAFTA.
Now, Mike, the media tends to always talk about the negatives of a Trump presidency because of the type of person he is. But really, when we look at it, what are the positives here for Canada?
Well, I think really interesting, Drex, is that maybe they're going to put Keystone back on the table. Trump was also on record as being a very strong supporter. Now, think about what that would mean. That could mean an extra 1 million barrels a day of Canadian-produced oil could get access to world market prices. That's the problem right now. You know, we sell our oil at a discount. It's called the Canada Select. It's about $15 a barrel. So think about that. We get an extra $1 million out to get world prices. That's $15 million extra in revenue a day. So that would be, you know, very positive there. I think the other thing is that Trump's domestic policies are more pro-growth for the U.S. economy than Hillary Clinton's. And, you know, let's face it, we export to the States. We need a strong U.S. economy.
So one last thing. Trump made a lot of promises about bringing jobs back to America, making America great again. How likely is that to happen?
I say not very likely at all. I mean, it's the kind of talk you always hear from politicians. He's more bombastic than most. But keep in mind this. The biggest problem has been job loss due to technological change. Estimates are about as high as 80%. Only 20% was foreign competition, but it's yet another one of these predictable promises from politicians throughout Europe. We've heard it in Canada, you know, that somehow they've got this magic policy wand that's going to create economic growth and jobs. Well, that's a lot tougher than it sounds, especially if he's anti-trade there. You know, so, I mean, maybe the best they can hope for in the States is that he'll at least pay attention or lip service to blue-collar workers. You know, I mean, let's face it. I thought the biggest mistake Hillary Clinton made in the campaign was to call them deplorables. And I thought, you can't marginalize people like that. But no, I don't think Mr. Trump's going to be able to do anything to do this magic returning of manufacturing jobs, especially when technology is the big problem.
All right. Thanks for that, Michael Campbell.
Cheerful as always. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Vancouver's news, Vancouver's talk. This is News Talk 980.